Greetings, peace, comrades. Welcome to another episode of We Charge Colonialism, the Pan-Afrikan book club, where we discuss revolutionary texts, put it in its proper context, and have these discussions, how connecting these readings to our current experiences. And Right now, we are covering Dr. Bobby Wright's Mentacide, which we'll get into later. But I am Ikemba, one of the writers, researchers, and organizers at We Charge Colonialism, here with my comrade, my brother. What's going on?
Yeah, this is Frank, host for the Revolutionary Repatriation Educational Lecture Series every Saturday at 12 p.m.
Indeed. And this right here, the Pan-Afrikan Book Club, is going to be happening every Sunday now at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So we move from our Saturday time to Sunday. So make sure you tap in. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And to like and share this. If you joining us now, like and share. And for those who will be joining us later, make sure that you like and share this podcast. We charge colonialism. Before we get into anything, just so we understand what we are about and what we do. We charge colonialism provides the tools to bring decolonization out of abstraction into reality for African people globally. We charge colonialism is a grassroots media outlet seeking domestic and international recognition that Africans globally are presently colonized and therefore are owed the right to sovereignty, autonomy, and self-determination. It is the goal of WCC to accomplish a global awareness surrounding the plight of Africans and our status as colonized people. We will raise that awareness with the shared intention of engaging our people to act on it. All right, so this is part of that movement, that decolonization movement. We do promote decolonization. We promote revolution here on this channel. There's nothing about us that's telling our people to sustain the system or integrate into the system. Assimilation and integration is antithetical to African people's existence and survival. And I think that's what we are really discussing too in this text Mentacide, which this is the part 2. So we was going over it last week, and just to give a little recap, I guess. One of the things that Dr. Bobby Wright talked about was this difference between menticide and brainwashing, which I think is very important, because when we look at the process of brainwashing, and Dr. Bobby Wright brings this out, brainwashing is sort of this indoctrination that is taking place, or this miseducation that takes place to get you to think and behave in a way that will benefit the oppressor. So the oppression and exploitation of African people would not be able to sustain itself if Black people did not think the way that the colonizer or the oppressor wanted them to think. And they're able to perpetuate this oppression and exploitation by controlling those institutions that are necessary to influence the thoughts and the behavior of African people. So this is brainwashing, which is connected to menticide, but there's a difference, right? Because with brainwashing, it doesn't necessarily need to lead to the extermination or genocide of African people. That's the difference between brainwashing and menticide. Whereas though menticide, according to Dr. Bobby Wright, it's the deliberate control of the thoughts of African people for the result of their extirpation or genocide, their extermination, right? So brainwashing does help when it comes to menticide, but menticide is different. So during slavery, brainwashing didn't necessarily lead to genocide because they needed African people, right? They needed their labor. So there wasn't, you can't really look to slavery in America or anywhere where African people are and see like mass killing taking place As a matter of fact, there were laws against that, you know, because you're killing, it's the killing of someone's property. So, you know, the killing of African people would take place if they tried to escape, maybe, or they tried to harm their master. There were laws that justified that murder. Now, when it comes to Mentacide, when there's no longer any need for, where people feel like there's no longer a need for African labor or African existence, the Mentacide kind of, you know, plays into that, gets them to think in a way where we would kill them, and they will also cause harm and destruction to each other. So that a Frey, that was a lot on Mentacide and brainwashing. But if you want to add on before we get into the text, go right ahead.
I mean, just to add on to what you said, you know, very brilliant point, and that also, like, the brainwashing aspect also were with Mentacide, where relatively, for example, what we're going to see with the United Nations, for example. Let me set that example, because I think they have the United Nations this week. I think it should be this week or so. So what we're going to see with the United Nations, you know, where African leaders have been brainwashed, thinking that they are now on the same stage, right, with the United Nations, with the world body. Right there, their brain have been washed, because, for example, hey, they are now, you know, on the same platform with, for example, the United States president, right? They want to have veto power. Now, but the reality here is, right, you do not have veto power in the United Nations like the United States president, or like Russia president, or like China president, right? Or like the Indian, you know, like those people. You do not have that veto power. You do not have that power like them. But just because you see yourself on the same stage, on the same pulpit, right, giving speech, and you feel you're representing your country, just like how the United States represent her country, or any other nation represent their country in that area, right? But this is where Mentacide work. Whatsoever the U.S. says on our platform, on our pulpit, right, concerning the U.S. is going to be done. Whatsoever China say in representation of China, for the interest of China, regardless what or not, who veto it, who don't veto it, is going to work for China or for the Chinese people, right? But with African nations, African leaders, whatsoever you say on our pulpit, on our platform, whatsoever advocacy is never going to work, because you are a puppet, right? It's never going to work, because someone else have to agree. Either China have to agree, either UN, how to call it, the United States have to agree, either Russia have to agree, either India have to agree, before anything can be done in Africa. Now, what that also means is, this is where Mentacide also work. Once you are at that platform, you will be unable, or once you reach, right, the colonizer that we are trying to decolonize, once you reach them, right, you will be unable to solve the issues of Africa, to represent Africa. That also means that once you go back to the African continent, you will not be able to summon African leaders, you as an African, to summon African leader to discuss about African issues. Because once the European leave the United Nations, they summon Europe, and they talk about what need to benefit Europe and what need to benefit the citizens of Europe. The Chinese, the Asian country, they do the same thing. North America, they do the same thing when it comes to, you know, them and our North America, right? Now, Mexico may not be involved, Venezuela, those things, right? But the reality here is the US, Canada, they get together and they discuss what need to benefit them. Go ahead, Nkima.
Yeah, no, I got you. I was looking to go live on IG, but we in the middle of it, so I'm gonna leave that alone. But anyway, no, appreciate that add-on. I think you're speaking to the mindset. This is mentality that we have that continues to support the status quo, that continues to support bourgeois society. There's nothing about the system now that I think that is salvageable. Revolution is the answer. So when we look at our these so-called leaders who continue to push for us to engage in the system in a way that isn't calling for the complete destruction. And I'm not saying that, you know, we have to go out there, and some of our leaders or politicians have to go out there and promote it, because you do have to move strategically, right? Like some of us in these spaces, we can have those conversations, but we may have some people that need to go in some spaces where they have to speak with a particular language that doesn't alienate them from that space where they can do the work of revolution. But those people have to be held accountable by us. You know, they're supposed to be carrying out the mission of revolution, nationalism, that is being led by those people who are doing this, you know, 24/7, or who are doing this as much as possible, right? Creating these spaces, liberated spaces, and so forth. So we have to work together. But they're going into these spaces not with that mindset. And that's the problem. You know, when you have people who are in positions, Africans in positions of leadership, who are voting for bills that's going to cause more incarceration of Africans, right? That is funding more police presence that's mental-sidal behavior right there. You know, this is what Dr. Bobby Wright is talking about. That's mental-sidal behavior. And it's on all levels. I'm not just talking about those people who are walking around with degrees. It's also on the level of those people who are in the streets, who are causing harm to other Africans, right? That's mental-sidal behavior. You wanted to add on?
Yeah. And you said something, right? You said about revolution. And let me add to this, right? Because most of our people, right, that refuse to watch platform like this, when they hear about revolution, they think that it is something bad. But let me make this clear to them. When you hear revolution, right, it's not going against somebody. It's not going against somebody, right? No. The truth here is every nation, every race, the United States herself is doing the same thing we call revolution, right? They are doing it. Chinese, they are doing it. What they are doing in their interest, for their race, for their culture, is revolution. What the Australians are doing, kicking out the native Australian or the New Guinea Papua, is revolution. Look, whatsoever the European Union are doing is revolution. Yes. So when you hear revolution, it's not something where you feel that, oh, only black people are struggling, only black people. No. Revolution is something that you do in your interest. It's something that you do to benefit your race. It's something that you do to benefit your nation. Okay? It's something that you do. That's what it is.
No, absolutely, comrade. Absolutely. And let's jump right into it, because I think, like, with this conversation that we're having now, Dr. Bobby Wright is going to flush this out, and we're going to be able to build some more. Appreciate everybody too for tapping in. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Make sure to like and share this podcast with others as well. And greetings to the family that's out there. You know, Kaka Richard, Brother Richard, Kaka Sekou Torre, aka Nkrumah. Appreciate you all. My man G Brown, Grady from the Lou. and everybody else that's joining us. So I'm going to share my screen right here, and we're going to get right into it. Again, I'm going to share the link in the chat. It's also in the description for those who are tapping in later. You'll be able to get this. I think is an important text, man, because it's speaking to the psychology of the people that we're dealing with, our enemies, our natural enemies, as well as our own people who are operating with mental-cidal behavior. So I'm going to put this link in the chat. Right on. And it's a lot been happening lately, right? I don't even know if we got time to even talk about that, but maybe in this conversation we can bring that up. I don't even need to say it for everybody to know what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna pick up right here, and I think we left off here, but I think we can go into this a bit more. This is this idea of capitalism sort of being able to, the destruction of capitalism will destroy racism, right? Like those two things. If we get rid of capitalism, then racism would disappear with it. This is an argument that some people will make. But look into this and flesh this out a little bit more. This quote right here. Wabogo documents the historical racist character of the white race. Most Marxists, socialists, and any non-Marxian social scientists claim that racism originated after and as a result of capitalism, therefore would disappear when capitalism disappears. 5 original theories usually show that slavery begets racism before capitalism existed. The second is that the capitalism origin premise does not explain the mass character of racism in several European countries that speak different languages and have different cultures. Gobenar's theory never reached the essentially illiterate white masses in his time. Mass literacy is a relatively recent phenomenon. Many countries in Europe today have relatively illiterate masses. Portugal, for example, according to many, has an illiteracy rate of over 75%. So his and other theories cannot account for it. Their criticism has been stated that is European languages are anti-Black. There has not been enough time since capitalism began for all of these different languages to have acquired the same character. Fourth, if the reason for racism was conquest, then all conquered people should have been judged equally inferior. They were not. Orientals were considered strange, exotic, and even barbaric, but not unintelligent, except ironically by Karl Marx and a few others. Yellow people were considered to be less inferior than blacks because they were less Black, not simply because they weren't conquered or were conquered to a lesser degree. The fifth criticism deals with the contention that the elimination of capitalism will eliminate racism. As others have noted, even if capitalism were racism's mother, elimination of capitalism would not necessarily mean elimination of racism. All living things are capable of reproduction, but the children survive after the parent dies, often changing their nature in doing so. Today, racism is firmly rooted in the white masses. Contrarily, capitalism is not. The average white does not understand what capitalism is, nor can they practice it, but they can practice racism that is reinforced by their whole culture. A change to another political system, dictatorship of the white proletariat, for example, will not alter the collective mentality of a given people in any reasonable period of time. There are considerations. White workers who socialists claim are not really racist do not perceive it to be in their interest to eliminate racism. As the United States of America declines, whites will reason that a minority Black population is expendable. A genocidal war against Blacks would appear to be an easy solution for an already armed, organized white population. Under white domination, socialism, protests, and any form about racism would be outlawed as against the revolution, as in Cuba. Meeting among Blacks for any reason will be illegal. Many of the superstructures of capitalism can be placed on a socialist base without serious modifications of the former, just as can be done with a house. In any event, we are doomed if we place our survival in the hands of a white body. Yes, I'm gonna move on to this next section. But before we do, I just had one thought, and Frank, if you want to add anything, go right ahead. I just want to say this: there's a lot to unpack in that quote. But when it comes to capitalism and racism, I think capitalism and racism, those things rose together. I don't believe that capitalism, I guess you can say, sort of like the foundation of capitalism, its development in its early stage, set the stage for colonialism, which will bring about colonialism and capitalism was working hand in hand. As a matter of fact, capitalism is an efficient system on the expansion of empire. And so with the spread of colonialism, racism is a natural byproduct of colonialism. Historically, you can look at the othering of other people when it came to the colonial enterprises. Colonialism has been going on. The colonization of other lands and people have been going on for thousands of years. And so what we call racism today was not called racism at that time, but the othering of other people, which could be categorized as some form of bigotry or ethnocentrism that existed, right? These things developed together. And this is not to say internally there were divisions of labor, there were class or caste divisions that were created internally. But when we're talking about the expansion of these complex political economic systems, that's going to come with the othering of other people. So capitalism, again, just, I'll stop here because I think there's a lot to say about this, but this development of capitalism went hand in hand with colonialism. Those two things were operating together. And so the spread of capitalism through the use of colonization brought about the development of racism. Those two things, I think, cannot exist independently, in my opinion. But I think that the history speaks for itself. But Frank, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, just as you are explaining, right, I was able to get down something, especially when you say capitalism, and also you talk about racism. So, and going back to, those era, so when you mention capitalism, and then I began to understand or to get a conclusion that, it is an ideology. So these were folks, just like how they sat down 1884, they divided Africa among themselves, right, to go and colonize, right, after slavery. So it was an ideology, right? They sat down on a table. So in order to have that capital or that capital power, right, of what they wanted to do, what it did was, okay, so we have to dehumanize, certain people or a race, right? We have to get rid of certain people or a race. So then that was when racism came in. So what they said was, if we are going to have a capitalist society, right, then we have to create hate, because capitalism can never operate based on history, right? Capitalism can never operate without hate. Now, if you bring in hate, then that means you have to hate certain people, right? You have to have racism. So racism also means hate. In order to practice racism, in order to carry on racism, you have to hate. And that is why during those era, you have places like black only or white only or black don't go here, or this, that, XYZ. That was hate. You have to create that level of hate, right? In order to bring division, with races, right? Or we are not the same, your race is this, your race is that. So capitalism, in order to have a capitalist society, you have to create hatred. And you can see that for example, in the US here, a capitalist society, you see that 24/7. And that is why, right, there are gun violence, And once certain people are being gunned down, and certain people is talking about, hey, we need to talk about these gun issues. We need to get rid of it. We need to put, a solution to the table. But those that benefit from it or have been benefited from it, they will say, no, it is all right. We need to keep it. But equally so, they don't allow certain people to have it, right? So in order to have a capitalist society, you have to create hatefulness. And once you create that hatefulness, then you have racism. Now, after they have racism, then they have to have a what? A system. Because what they have created have to stay for the benefit of those who created it. So in order for it to stay, you have to create that system. Okay, so it is that system that is working right now. Again, that goes back again to revolutionary, right? So, like, one of our comrades put here, if I can put that, let me put down a boy here. He said, because we were talking about revolutionary, so I believe that was what he was trying to clarify here. He said, I classify it against exploitation and evil system. Now, that's a system, right? So they have that capitalism, and then they create that hatred, racism, and then in that they have laws in there. So those laws are referred to the system laying down. It is a revolutionary system that they have from way back of their forefather, and up to now, they are still going with it. I just want to add that there.
No, I appreciate that. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I don't know, my computer froze, but if you can hear me, that's good. Hopefully it unfreezes in a moment. I can't get off of this screen. I'm a read, and hopefully at some point I'm good. But let me know if there's any technical issues.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, bringing you back. Okay.
All right. Good. All right. So let's move on to, look like y'all can't see my screen though, but I'm gonna read this next section. Again, we're covering Mentacide. This is Mentacide by Dr. Bobby E. Wright. All right. And I want to move down some from here because we kind of covered this last week. I'm gonna pick up right here with Martin Delany in 1852. Dr. Martin R. Delany, the first Black to finish Harvard University Medical School, made the following observation. Unfortunately for us as a body, we have been taught that we must have some person to think for us instead of thinking for ourselves. So accustomed are we to submission and this kind of training that is with difficulty even among the most intelligent of the colored people. An audience may be elicited for any purpose, whatever, if the expounded is to be colored. And the introduction of a subject is treated with indifference, if not contempt, when the originator is a colored person. And this is the 1850s. So when he's saying color, he's basically talking about Black people, because I think like today, color encompasses a lot of different groups, but we're talking about like antebellum United States, antebellum period United States. So when the originator is a colored person, indeed, the most ordinary white person is almost reread, while the most qualified colored person is totally neglected. Nothing from them is appreciated. Young men and women must now prepare for usefulness. The day of our elevation is at hand. All the world now gazes at us. Unfortunately for our people, so soon as their children learn to read a chapter in the New Testament and scribble a miserable hand, they are pronounced to have learning enough and taken away from school. No use to themselves nor community. Let us have an education that shall practically develop our thinking faculties and manhood, and then, and not until then, shall we be able to vie with our oppressors. Go where we may. Let our young women have an education. Let their minds be well informed, well stored with useful information and practical proficiency, rather than the light, superficial accomplishments, but they must be useful. Our females must be qualified because they are to be the mothers of our children. as mothers are the first nurse and instructors of children. From them, children consequently get their first impressions, which being always the most lasting, should be the most correct. Raise the mothers above the level of degradation, and offspring is elevated with them. No people are even elevated above the condition of their females. Hence, the condition of the mother determines the condition of the child. To know the position of the people, it is necessary to know the condition of their females, and despite themselves, they cannot rise above their level. That's Delaney in 1852. Now, you know you're going to see that quote on our Instagram today. That's a powerful quote, man. So we could circle back down to this, but I just want to go a little further. I'll read a little further because Dr. Bobby Wright we're going to tie what he says to this particular quote. In order to further understand the mentacidal process, it is necessary to discuss some very basic, irrefutable techniques. It is understood that whites will question the veracity of these dynamics because an understanding of them by blacks will threaten their omnipresent force throughout the world. Some blacks will refute the analysis because one major utility of the mentacidal process is the ability to establish a protective barrier of victims. With those caveats in mind, let us examine some of the techniques of menticide. It is very clear that one of the most successful methods of menticide is how these whites use it in order to replace all indigenous cultures with their own. All right, just want that people let that register, digest that. The evidence seems to suggest that initially they felt that this was necessary in order to ensure their survival, since the area of the world in which they originated, now known as Europe, was and is today incapable of sustaining life due to the cold and hostile environment. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing theories that white psychopathology is due to their being a minority in the world and their inability to produce color due to a melanic deficiency. The theory of color confrontation states that the white or color deficient Europeans responded psychologically with a profound sense of numerical inadequacy and color inferiority upon their confrontation with the massive majority of the world, people all of whom possess varying degrees of color producing capacity. This psychological response, be it described as conscious or unconscious, was one of the deeply senseless inadequacies which struck a blow at the most obvious and fundamental part of their being. Their external appearance might be anticipated in terms of modern psychological theories. An uncontrollable sense of hostility and aggression developed defensively, which has continued to manifest itself through the entire historic. Dr. Diop, in response to a question concerning Dr. Welsing's theory, made the following comment. There's absolutely no doubt that the white race, which appeared for the first time during the Upper Paleolithic, around 20,000 BC, was the product of depigmentation. There can be no doubt that the cultural outlook of these proto-whites was eventually conditioned during the glacial epoch by the extremely harsh conditions of their northern cradle until the moment of their migratory movements toward the southern areas around 1500 BC. Molded by their environmental cradle, these early nomadic whites undoubtedly developed a social consciousness typical of the hostile environment to which they were confined for a long period. Xenophobia was one of the traits of this social consciousness. Following this line of thought, the whites, without any historical precedent, went forth into the civilized world and began to oppose their culture on others. And I like how he said they went into the civilized world because they would have us believe civilization started with them. Mainly through the menticidal methods of religion and literacy techniques and the use of military force when these methods failed. In private correspondence from Dr. Harold Pates, 1978, a black scholar of the first order, the following observation was made. The white man is civilized only because he says he is, and not by any historical standard of practice. Because of his literacy, he has written himself into civilization as though his theories were practice. For him, the theory is an end. And of course, if we are not careful, it will be our end. There is no question but that today the written word literacy, namely the ability to read and write, has achieved the status of the gods, and in the process made the white race supreme. In order to validate a white worldview, blacks are constantly referred to references written by them to justify their position. The Bible, regardless of whether it is the New or Old Testament, is a very good example. The Europeans translated the beliefs and ideas of Afrikaans into their own language with their interpretation and then utilized these revisions to justify their superiority over blacks. In fact, they are very blatant with it, as the first page of the New Testament reveals by the defiant statement of King James that he has diligently revised the word of God. Yet the Mentacide process has been so effective that blacks have accepted the written word of God to such an extent that the whites no longer have to defend it, thereby placing them indeed in the company of the gods. The literacy technique has also been effective with those who should protect us from that method of exploitation, namely black intellectuals. This part in particular, we could connect to the Dr. Who was it, Chancellor Williams or Chancellor Williams quote? No. Who was that? Diop. I think it was Diop. Forgot already. The effect of them is that generally the higher blacks progress through education, the more alienated and useless they become to their people. Read that again. The effect of them is that generally the higher blacks progress through education, the more alienated and useless they become to their people. The Honorable Marcus Garvey profoundly stated that the traitor of other races is generally confined to the mediocre or irresponsible individual. But unfortunately, the traitors among the Negro race are generally to be found among the men of higher place in society, the fellows who call themselves leaders. The man who will compromise rights of his race can be classified in no other way than that of a traitor also. There will be further discussion on this topic on education, and nothing should be construed as to believe that I am suggesting that blacks should not learn to read or write or not aspire to formal education. Forbid the thought. I am only stating the inherent danger of the process. In order to fully understand the mentacidal process, it is essential that an analysis be done of the personality of its creators and purveyors, namely the white race. In an earlier work, Bobby Wright, 1975, I stated that in their relationship with blacks, whites exhibit the behavior of psychopaths, and their behavior reflects an underlying biologically transmitted proclivity that is rooted deep in their evolutionary history. Mentacide is the method, and genocide is the ultimate goal of that behavior. All right. So I felt I had to keep going to get to that point. But Frank, we'll give you some space to react.
Man, let me be frank with you, right? I never read this part.
Okay.
And listen, it kind of relates exactly to what I spoke of yesterday. For some reason, I'm telling you, for some reason, I don't know. But you see what he's talking about culture?
Yes.
What he's talking about the Bible? If you see what I spoke about yesterday.
You was talking about Mentacide.
Yeah, that's the same thing exactly. And what he just saying here, right? And he said something that white don't have to defend, right? Anymore. It is the black man who is not defending what the white man brought and gave to us. This is what exactly I spoke about yesterday. And I said, it is the black man right now. It is the black man who is defending the white man, who is defending, and I put as Esau, I put as the Edomite. Exactly the same thing. And I said, right, and he said something here about culture. Like, basically what he's saying, right? We have to go back to our way of life, to our culture. And that's the same thing yesterday I spoke about. And that is what exactly he said here. And listen to what he said here. He even talked about family, right? And in our family matter, he talked about the mothers, the roles of the mothers.
Yeah.
Now, he's also talking about culture, like how we lived then. How did we live then? And he's talking about white people or European went to Africa and became civilized, right? And then came back to Europe, wrote their book, and then in there, they put in there that should not, how to call it, plagiarize. If you read our book, you have to say, the Roman, according to Rome, according to Greece, according to, days, Socrates. But meanwhile, Socrates was in Africa where he had no knowledge, he was never civilized, he was never educated, but went to Africa, became civilized, became educated. Alexander, he was never great. But the reason why he became great, it was because he went to Africa. Africa made him great. He learned his education there to the extent he, even after his education, his research, he had a library in Egypt. And then when he was about to leave, he brought down the library to destroy the evidence that everything he learned it in Africa, and then went to Europe or went to Greece, and then wrote and never gave up credit. These are the 10 things that we've been saying, and this is what exactly he's talking about. And I was saying yesterday, look, Africans, right, or Black people, we need to consolidate our power, right, into one system, because regardless what, these people, right, they have consolidated their belief, their power. I mean, when it comes to them, that is why they defend European anywhere they go in the world. They know there's a system, there's a government that protect them. But because we Black, we have failed to do that. That is why we are never, ever protected anywhere we go. And this is what exactly he's talking about here. And now, because we are being bought into these things, right? We defend the white race, we defend Europe, we defend the West, anything they give to us, anything they bring to us, and then we defend their ideology. We defend their ideology. Can you imagine? Black people will say the world will never ever function once there is no capitalism. I'm telling you, you will hear Black people, you will hear African people saying capitalism is the best. The world will never function without capitalism. But the reality here is, it is our same capitalism, the same people that created racism and then created a system. It is our same system that is destroying Africa when it comes to proxy war. It is destroying our African nation when it comes to bioweapons. It is destroying African community when it comes to food, poisoning food, right? No system, no educational system, no healthcare system in your nation, in your continent, in your community, wherever you are. These are the kind of system. So we cannot go with a white capitalist mentality, and then we think we want to use that to improve our system when the foundation of capitalism was based on racism. It is based on system to subjugate you, to put you to dehumanize you, to put you in a system that you are, so that you can rise. And this is what Bobby is talking about when it comes to Mentacide, and this is why we are going through these things.
No, absolutely, and I think, like, when we look at the connection that he's making to what Delaney was saying, and that's why I wanted to keep going to that part where he's talking about the quote unquote most educated among the African nation, how most of them are no good to us. You know what I'm saying? And when Delaney made his quote, he was talking about the most educated among Africans, those who were literate. These were people who studied the Bible. If you look at our history, it was the church that was at the forefront of any sort of fight for change. I don't want to say revolution, but any struggle for change in this society. It was African leaders, the reverends, the church. Those were the people who the African nation looked to, Black people looked to for support and leadership and guidance. And so Delaney is getting to this in the 1850s, where he's talking about, these these people are being told to read the Bible, but go no further than that. So their education takes them no further than that Bible that was given to them by who? Who's the authority on that Bible? Europeans. We're looking at a European interpretation of the Bible, and I know that many of our leaders have attempted to use that Bible as a form of liberation theology. But at the end of the day, we have to go beyond that. We have African spiritual systems, ancestors that we can look to outside of what was created by the European. Because what tends to happen too is that now we think of what we got to do is better versions of what the European has done, right? And sort of just try to remix some things so that it can work for us. But no, we got to get rid of all of it. That's what I would argue. Get rid of all of it. Now, fast forwarding as far as just like presently when he's talking about, so it's not necessarily like the church leaders who are representing that leadership today, but these so-called intellectuals, right? These people who go and get these PhDs, right? Or these business entrepreneurs, and they look at the petty bourgeoisie as leaders of the Black community. But these are people who are doing what? They're trying to create a better version of European society. These are people who their ideology and philosophy is influenced by European thinkers. So this is something that we have to critique, and this is why this is the same thing, Malcolm was critiquing when he talked about the Black bourgeoisie. They become no good to either you or me. Carter G. Woodson talked about this in The Miseducation of the Negro, how Black people who receive this education are no good to you and me. And so, I think this conversation is important because this is not necessarily us trying to attack and bring our brothers and sisters down, but to be conscious of that, right? And to, what is it that you have to do to make sure that you are carrying out menticidal behavior, right? That's causing more harm than actual good. Because the only thing that we should be thinking about is our liberation from bourgeois society, man. You wanted to
and let me add something there, and then even that you just mentioned the church, right? The church is where widely, right, these metastasis behavior are being practiced. For example, right, the European, when, for example, they destroy the African system by lying to the Africans, right? And then they left their belief system. Because in reality, right, the African system, back then, they spoke directly to whatsoever they believe in. And they got immediate response to what they believe in. If they wanted rain to fall, they pray to whatsoever they believe in, and rain came instantly. If they wanted sun to shine, they pray and sun shine instantly. If they had some bad harvest and they wanted to have good harvest that season, they pray to whatsoever thing they did whatsoever sacrifice they needed to do, and in that season they will have good harvest. I mean, they spoke directly to what they believe in, right? And what they worship. But, and this is where Bobby is talking about. The European came and told you, forgo that. And then the European created their own God and then told African to worship it. That is why you can see African going to the Vatican, bowing down to the Pope. That's the white man God. They bow down to the Pope, and that is why when you fast, African fast and pray, their prayer can be answered, because when they bow down and pray, they have a white images in their head. So when they bow down and pray, they're bowing down and praying to a white God, to the Pope, right? Then they go to Israel. Look, in Kimba, I'm telling you, if you see Africans pastor go to Israel, they go to Israel and bring oil. So the oil in Africa, the holy oil in Africa that is being produced by African priests, that is being produced by African kings, they don't want it. They don't see that as holy. They go to Israel.
Not by no African. That's Mentacide.
Yes. They go to Israel, bring some oil that have been produced.
Man.
And the oil that has been produced there, guess what? It is a raw material that was taken from Africa. For example, like palm, right? They take this same palm, this same raw material from Africa, take it to Israel, take it to Europe, and process it, fix it there, and then they put labor on it. And then these African pastor or deacons or religious leaders will go to Israel and then bring this same oil. And then call it holy oil.
Yeah.
Not knowing it is the same oil that they took from Africa, the same palm oil they took from Africa, the same raw material they took from Africa, and then took it to that area called Israel. Now, listen to this, and I spoke of this yesterday. The same African will leave from Africa and go to Israel and go and bow down to a wall. And they say they are speaking true to that wall, true to the wall, and speaking to their God. But you left your African belief. Then if you bow down to a wall, you pray to a wall, talking to a wall, then how can the white man come to Africa and tell you, oh, the object you are praying to is false God? But you in Israel, talking to a wall, is a wall not a false God? Do you see that Mentacide behavior? Do you see? It makes no sense.
Yeah, we've been trained to just like really, to look at ourselves as incapable, inferior at the end of the day. And many of us have broke away from that spell. I think that we have people who think they broke this spell, but their actions and their thinking and actions speak otherwise. There's sort of that cognitive dissonance people are dealing with as well. So on so many levels, right? That's why decolonization, what we doing, this conversation we having, the process of decolonization, it's an ongoing thing, man. It's a struggle.
And then they go to Mecca, they call it pilgrimage. They go to Mecca. When they go to Mecca, what do? They go and bow down to a rocks.
Yeah.
They bow down to a rocks. It's not that is an object, but you have so many rocks, so many hills and mountains. I mean, natural mountain, natural hills. I mean, why can you bow down to those hills, to those mountains? Was created by your ancestor, but whatsoever. But you go and bow down to a rock that created by man. Imagine you call it pilgrimage, and you go there and bow down to a rock. That is an object.
No, it's deep, man. I'm with you. I think what we have to do through this process of revolution, man, is like really have this. It's the historical component, man, that is missing. Like our people have become ahistorical. And it's easy for us to have this conversation because we understand that history. We know the history. We know what our people have accomplished, and we know what happened to have like really severed those ties with our ancestors. People don't really know who their enemy is, man, and it's been designed for our people not to know who their enemy is. And I have this, kind of Dr. Bobby Wright. This is something that he spoke to as far as the way that people operate when they have purpose, when you know who your enemy is and you have created a purpose for yourself, such as those people who are those Zionists, their children, they go on to school carrying guns. You know what I'm saying? They serve it in the military. They are being educated, indoctrinated, and all of that to know who their enemy is. Right. And so they function in a particular way. These are people who have purpose. This is you have this little ass space that is being occupied by this small group of people who is able to have tremendous influence on the whole world. How is that? You know what I'm saying? Because they understand who they are as a people. They have purpose. and they understand who their enemies are. We are the ones who are having that problem. We do more fighting among ourselves than with our enemy. We cooperate with our enemy more than we cooperate with ourselves. So that's menticidal behavior. This quick point, I think right here, I'm gonna do this last paragraph because I think it speaks to what we are discussing right now. It says the white race has at least 3 distinct incomparable traits that seem to be genetically transmitted. Predatory behavior toward people and their land. That's one. And I'll read that again. The white race has at least 3 distinct incomparable traits that seem to be genetically transmitted. Predatory behavior toward people and their land. 2, a predilection for senseless destruction of nature and people. And 3, the ability to persuade blacks to support and protect them against their own interests. The first 2 aforementioned traits would have predestined the white race for extinction long ago, if not for the third. What's the third? Go back to that. The ability to persuade blacks to support and protect them against their own interests. So without the third, them operating with these 2, number 1 and 2, we would have wiped them out a long time ago. So it is very interesting to speculate on what the world would be like today if the whites have been restricted to the cold and hostile environment of Europe. However, the concern is the third trait, namely the ability of whites to control blacks through the menticidal process, which produces acculturation, namely the process in which the indigenous culture of blacks is destroyed and replaced with white culture. This is the modus operandi of the white race, regardless of what part of Europe the various tribes originated. It must be remembered that initially the white race have been welcomed in Africa regardless of where they landed, such as there is no history of the whites invading any part of Africa because it was an African custom, which still exists, that strangers were to be received with respect. However, once accepted, they began to very cunningly and systematically attack and destroy those who had made them welcome. Unfortunately, because of the efficacy of the menticidal process, we are still treating whites as strangers in spite of our detrimental historical relationship with them. So I'll stop there. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, man. Look, like I said, I think these ancestors, right? They spoke through me yesterday. I'm telling you, because the whole reading, was the same thing that I spoke about yesterday. And you read something. You said that white people, their behavior being genetic, right? Mm-hmm. That is, it can change. And this is what I spoke about yesterday when I talked about Rebecca, right? When she was pregnant, where the Esau of the story of Esau and Jacob came from. And I said, it was said that there are 2 manners of people in there, and there are 2 manner of people. It means they are distinct. Their characteristics are not the same. Their behavior are not the same, right? And then when Esau came out, and I said there was a description given to Esau being red, which is white people, right? And now when Jacob came out, there was no description. Why? Because everyone at that time looked like Jacob. Because that was the reason why there was no description. So when you said it is genetic, right? And this is what I spoke about yesterday. And I said, look, what the Edomite or Esau, right? What they are doing, right? Or what they have been doing and what they are doing still today, it is something that they will never stop. It is something that they will never stop. So instead of us continue to point finger at them and say, hey, you are bad, you are this, you are that. Yes, we can bring out, their pretense. We can bring out their behavior against us, right? So that it should remind us, so that we can know who we're dealing with. But equally so, then what can we do as a people, as a race, right? What we need to do to get rid of these attitudes, to get rid of these things, right? To leave the stage that we are in, right? It is about unity. It is about coming together. It is about consolidating whatsoever thing that we need to do that empower us. Because the Chinese do the same thing. Look at the Chinese. Look at the Russian. And look at the race of Esau. Everywhere they win. Australia, they win there. They take away the native people. They settle there, right? But again, they are all connected in one way or the other. They didn't even see when the DA in South Africa talked about white genocide. What Australia did, the prime minister, he called for them straight and said, hey, you guys come home. This is your place. And then what they did, they came to Trump. What Trump did, Trump summoned South Africa president. That's how it is. But again, who have ever summoned an African leaders and said, listen, this is what's going on in DRC Congo. Why are you not doing this? Why are you not doing this on the African continent? Hey, AU, who have ever summoned AU? Because we black people, we have never consolidated our power, our thought, right? We don't have a system that need to fight for us. And this is what exactly Bobby is talking about when it comes to Mentacide, because we cannot solve our own. We cannot defend. There's nothing that we defend, but we defend other people. We want to graft in other people. And this is what I spoke about yesterday. We always want to graft in other people, but people never graft us into their, or whatsoever that they are dealing with. And this is what exactly, we are fixing or we are going through.
And indeed, and on that note, I think it's important to walk away with. We're going to finish this too. I think we might as well come back for a third one to wrap this up. I think it's important for people to walk away with this understanding of what Mentacide is, to be able to identify it in ourselves, our own thinking and behavior, and identify it in others too. There has to be this elimination of this thought that acculturation or integration or assimilation into European society, bourgeois society, is the answer. That's menticidal behavior. That's what I would argue, because there's nothing like, even if you think about America, it kills me, people who support this red, white, and blue flag and these colors and want to identify themselves as American. And I'm talking about American identifying themselves with the state of America. The same state after the American Revolution still maintained the system of slavery. Under the red, white, and blue, by the time you get to the Civil War, under the red, white, and blue, you had over 4 million Africans enslaved in the United States of America under that red, white, and blue. Not the Confederate flag. Confederate flag didn't come until during the Civil War. That happened under the red, white, and blue. So this idea that we should be identifying with the same people who has enslaved and colonized us is menticidal behavior. And so, the struggle continues. Liberation, revolution is the answer. I want to leave with a Swahili, or I should say Swahili proverb: Haba Nahaba Hujaza Kibaba. A long journey is accomplished step by step. So this is a protracted struggle. We have to make sure that we are laying the groundwork, building the foundation for the next generation. Right? We want liberation in our lifetime, but we also want to make sure, whatever the case may be, that we building a strong foundation for the generation that's coming behind us and that's coming behind them. And so it's the work that we're doing now, and the ridding of any type of behavior that's going to divide colonized Africans all over the world, because the ultimate aim should be the overturning of this system. And so us fighting each other does no good in destroying the system. And so if that's not what you're trying to do, ask yourself, are you trying to destroy the system? Or are you trying to sustain the system? That should be the question you ask yourself. And if you're trying to sustain, it's Dr. Amos Wright, Dr. Amos and Wilson, I'm talking about Wright, but Amos and Wilson, right? It talks about what are we trying to conserve, right, for those Black conservatives. And that's something that you should be questioning if you're trying to conserve this relationship that we have as African people all around the world with the European. So that being said, any last thoughts before we sign off, comrade?
No, that's it. We good.
All right. So make sure you tap in next Saturday at 12 o'clock, right? 12 o'clock with Frank. And if you missed yesterday, subscribe to the channel. We have videos discussing various topics, so you can check them out on the replays on our channel. So thank you for joining us. We'll be back here to cover this book next week, Sunday at 10 a.m. So until next time, peace, guys.
The white power structure, because that's all we have in America. And the white power structure today is just as much interested in perpetuating slavery as the white power structure was 100 years ago. Only now they use modern methods of doing so. And realizing that the Black people in this country are waking up and becoming filled with a desire to be looked upon as men and as human beings. The white power structure, to slow down that struggle for freedom and human dignity, uses tricks. 100 years ago they could do it with chains. Today they use tricks, and one of the tricks that they've invented is this token integration, to get Negro, so-called Negro leaders to accept a few token crumbs of integration that don't solve any problem for the masses of Black people in this country whatsoever, but it does make the hand-picked Negroes be satisfied to slow down the cry of the masses. And a good example of that is as soon as the spirit of rebellion or revolution began to spread among the masses of Black people in this country, and they began to take an active part, and they showed that they weren't confined to this nonviolent approach, then the government or the power structure began to sit up and take notice.